So, Michael joined Citrix in 2006 as Director of IT and Strategy, PMO, and Operations. In 2008, as a Marketing Director, Worldwide Procurement created and ran the Enterprise Procurement function, responsible for the global indirect sourcing, purchasing, category management, contract negotiations, and administration as a vendor and management. Today, as a VP of Business Technology, Michael's responsible for applications, delivery, and enterprise architecture. He manages IT business alignment, project delivery, vendor performance to enable Citrix build, sell, deliver services for Citrix products. Let's give a round of applause.
So you've got me for about 30 minutes, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to take it back to the Jerry Maguire, and we say, you know, what did he start off with? Sure, value prop is the topic that we're at, and you have to generate value before you can capture it. So take it 2 clicks back. If we, do we have a clicker for the PowerPoint up here? Cool. Great. If we toggle over to the PowerPoint, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take it to culture, and I'm going to tell you a story, or many stories, about what I've done in culture. My argument is that essentially you have to start with culture. Why was Rene interested in Jerry to start off with? Well, the reason for that was the manifesto that he wrote, what he was about. Why? What did he stand for? What did he want to do? So what I'll take you through is, I'll take you some instances at Citrix where I've managed to define and amplify the culture. I wouldn't say set it from its start, but to say, what are you about? You go off on this endeavor, and how do you start off with? So maybe if we can toggle over to the video there, if we kick it off with that YouTube video. Yep. Knows what that is? Tell me what that is.
So I saw the New Zealand All Blacks play Australia several years ago in Auckland, and that was the All Blacks.
Yeah. So it's the All Blacks, the most winning team in rugby. Well, what they're doing at the start of every game is they do a haka, their traditional dance. What they're doing is they're leveraging their culture, their national culture, the Maoris, and they're saying, we are so good at this sport. We have perfected our model so well that we had some time left over, and we did a little dance. What we're going to do is we're going to brag about how we're about to beat you. We're so good at this, we don't consider this sport. It's just what we do. You have to ask every Kiwi, tell us, can you dance a haka? They all know how to do that. They redefine the equation and they turn it into battle. That they said, this is what we're about. They redefine and they bring in their culture to that. Who knows what this is? Semper Fidelis. Okay, what does it mean?
Always faithful.
Okay, well what does it mean in terms of the beliefs? What does it express?
No man left behind.
Exactly. It stands for something. It stands for something greater than a single individual. You leverage the culture as to how someone will tattoo themselves with that. They stand for beliefs as to what you're doing. You take many other examples of this that goes from sport to any organization. If we take China my mousy tongue as to the little red book of a way to believe, a set of beliefs. If you look in the US, it was strange for me coming here when I listen to my kids do the Pledge of Allegiance every day. You're leveraging your culture and you're saying, what are we about? What do we believe in? So the same thing in a commercial organization to say, what do you believe in? So let's play a little bit of word association here. I say culture, you say what? What does it mean to you? Culture? A way of life. Cool? What else? Compliance? Okay. Sorry? Corporate compliance. Yep. Okay. A belief system. Absolutely. So it means many things to many people. That there's various different connotations. It can be about an organization. It can be about an idea. It's many things to people. And how do you shape that? What's important? How can you influence it? My argument would be it's much more art than science, but you can certainly influence it as an individual and as a group. So what I'll share with you is examples of the Citrix corporate culture and what we believe in. We get down to our value system, and what this is we start with humility. What humility means for us is a sense of obligation before opportunity. If what we've said to our customers is, we will service you, how do you divide your priorities? Is it for future customers, or is it for existing customers? Well, it should be for existing. What have you made your promises, and that's where you put your priorities. If we look at respect, we say, okay, it's necessary to have a hierarchy within an organization, but that doesn't mean you treat people differently in the respect that you show them. Each individual should be respected for their contribution, not because of their title or the amount they're paid, it's for their being an individual. Then we look at integrity. Many organizations, most organizations will have integrity, but it's what you do in the case of adversity. If you look at Enron had integrity in their value system, but it was how people act under adversity. If we look at the word integrity comes from the Latin integer, one, to be consistent internally and externally. There's many cases where you look at Mark Hurd at HP, a fantastic culture that watered down the HP way. You look at some of those things in terms of personal integrity as to what people had, and it's a reflection of your actions. Then at Citrix, conviction, having the tenacity to stick with it, believing in these ideas to carry it through no matter what. So then, this carries through for us into what we believe. So similarly with you and an endeavor that you go out on, say what do you believe in? If any of you have used the Citrix products, we look at some of these and we say, work is not a place, simpler is better. If you've used GoToMeeting, you'll know it's not the most feature-rich application available to do what it does, but it's very simple, it's very intuitive. So we get back to a core of what do we believe in, and that carries through everything. I work in IT, keep it simple. That's what we want to do with everything we do. And then anyness. We say, for us what this means is any place that you work from, or you want to live from and enjoy yourself, any device that you use, any network that you operate on. We're agnostic to that, and we look at our value prop as to what we're trying to do, that we want to enable mobile work styles is where we're at. And these beliefs reinforce it. So this is the thing for you to say, what are we about? What is this endeavor at its core? Sure, it's going to have lots of features. Sure, you're going to get lots of interesting stuff. But if you can synthesize it back to the basics of what you believe in, that's very important, and amplify that. So then you turn it into a vision to say, what are you about? And what Citrix believes in is a world where people can experience work and life in harmony. This idea of life slicing, work better, live better. You're doing many of them simultaneously during the day. The 9-to-5 paradigm doesn't exist anymore. How do you take advantage of that and embrace it? So these are the kind of examples, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to take you through a couple of things that we've done at Citrix, in my team within the IT department, which is now propagating to other parts of the company. What we had is, we have these three things that we look at. We say, there's workflow, stuff that needs to get done. You've got people, the workforce, the people, vendors, partners that are going to get it done. And then we have the workplace. And of course, these are fragmented and there's multiple instances of the workplace as well. We combine this into what we call mobile work styles. 2.5 years ago, when I came into my current role at Citrix, we had a huge collaboration problem. So what I attempted to do was leverage our culture and say, how can we change the way we work here? So what we had is, we had this traditional work environment, what we call Dilbertville. 7-foot-high cubes. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the similar environment. It wasn't terrible, but we weren't collaborating as an IT department. We had the SAP team was competing with the Siebel team, the PMO didn't get on with the business analysts. There were lots of fiefdoms where people were defining themselves by the type of furniture and the amount of space that they had, the number of people in their team. I had ran out of space on the 2 floors in a building in Fort Lauderdale that I was on because it was 90% assigned. Whenever I'd get contractors in, I couldn't put them adjacent to the people that they needed to work with. They might be in some dark corner, pushed away, because that was the only leftover space that we had. So what we did was we went totally unassigned seating. We got rid of all of the cubes, we dropped the height down, we changed it entirely from the traditional way of line of sight. If I see John in today, he's probably productive. And we changed it over to results-oriented file with the assigned seating. We went to what we call these mobile work styles, where you get measured by your output rather than your presence. Where we will say, okay, you choose who to sit with, and you've got work that gets done. I don't care how it gets done or where it gets done from. I'm going to trust people. This was a really radical change, but what we were doing was taking advantage of our culture and our corporate beliefs to do this. So what we did was we simply reconfigured 2 of the floors. This is now into several other buildings in Fort Lauderdale. It's also went to our Paris office, our Parsippany, New Jersey, and it's propagating throughout the company. So what we did was we offered a number of different spaces. So what was previously a VP office was then turned into a shared space where anybody could take that space when they needed it. We had to have a certain number of guidelines. So for instance, one of the guidelines that we had was what we call beach toweling, where you would, if you go away from a space for more than 2 hours, you take your stuff with you. And if you violate that beach toweling rule, we have these little egg timers that people would put on your desk that runs through 120 minutes, and when you come back, you might say, oh, that's a little reminder that you're not being a good corporate citizen, that it was a self-regulating mechanism. So this is basically what we did, and much as we took away privacy, what we gave people was social. People like to be social, they like to interact with each other, and as we scaled as an organization, this was great because you might only know 20 people in your immediate circle. What if you now need to know 1,000 people on the Fort Lauderdale campus? It was really good at starting with this social hub where we break bread or share caffeine together in the morning. We get these personal interests and continue onto the professional. And then the working from home was an interesting one as well. Within the IT department, I have about 25% of my team works up to 2 days a week away from home. When we went to this new paradigm, people were saying, oh, I'm going to hate it. I'm going to work from home all the time. 6 months after we changed the way we work, the number that were teleworking was still the same. And the reason for that was half the people that were teleworking had stopped teleworking and were coming to the office because it was more fun and more productive to have these 10 or 15-minute meetings than trying to find a room that was pretty impossible before. And that was backfilled by people that were untethered because they no longer were dependent on a piece of paper or a piece of equipment under their desk. So the bottom line here, in terms of the results that we had, it was to address a collaboration problem. 62% of people say that we collaborate better. Collaboration is nice, but it only counts if it's about productivity. We look at that, and you see there there's 43% of people say they are more productive themselves. 8% say, I'm less productive. Candidly, that 8% wasn't the most productive to begin with. We then look in terms of happiness. 91% of people say this has positively impacted morale. And then, as I mentioned before, in terms of density and sharing the space, we were able to increase the density by 60%, so we didn't have to take over another floor, so the payback and cost avoidance was 1 year. People are more productive, people are happier, and it makes financial sense. That was a big win for us. But we were only able to do that because it was part of our culture. We knew who we were about as a culture, and this idea of humility, we were leveraging that. You look in terms of the linkages here from culture to your business strategy, to your org design. They're all interlinked with each other. My argument is you have to start first with culture. If we move on to another example of what we did with my team when we came in, we had this massive trust problem. That was very much red. And what I had to do was identify the problem. Say, okay, what is important to us as an organization? And this is the ask of you as you go through this and you say, what are our objectives? What do we believe in? What do we want to get out of this? For us, for instance, legitimizing family and saying this is very important to people in my organization. Okay, try to be inclusive of that. If we look at results, that's what people care about. Learning, we were underperforming in learning. So the suggestion there is, know what you're about, know what you can do, and you can measure it and say, how am I going to get at that? Trust, one of the things I had to do. There were a couple of people that I had to let go. When people then realize these people are let go because they are not trustworthy, they are violating these core values, others behave really, really well when they go, oh my God, accountability has improved dramatically. You're doing the right thing. Okay. So then we look at this and we say, the point I make here is, it's extremely important to have a good strategy. You won't get anywhere, you won't be able to generate value if you don't have a good strategy. But culture will trump strategy every time. You look in times of adversity as to when people fall back to their culture. The business strategies change regularly. In terms of competitive differentiation, you can create that with culture. A common set of values as to what people believe in. The New Zealand All Blacks do that in saying, this is what we are about as a nation. This is how they have a tremendous organization around that that's part of their culture. So it's important. And things that you do to amplify culture, you need to get people engaged. You need to enable them and energize them. Leverage your culture, take advantage of that. At Citrix, we're not very hierarchical in the way that we use our culture, so it was okay to say VPs don't have offices anymore. And it's also not the only way we work. There are other parts of the organization that still have a traditional format, and that's fine. We can both coexist effectively together. That you take this, when you believe, you can become what you believe. So if you are concise and you know what you're about in the purpose of this objective, then you have a much higher likelihood of succeeding with this. One final one I'll go on to, and I'll mention this. Who has read The 5 Dysfunctions of Team? Okay, so you see a few people there. Have you applied some of the techniques from that? Okay. Okay, cool. So, for instance, what we did was, in terms of getting us to work more effectively as a team, I mentioned some of the trust at the bottom of the pyramid. Identifying bad behaviors, calling them out, and rectifying that. Where we were then, we found our culture was creating a bit of a problem in this fear of conflict. We had this artificial harmony. Citrix is a very nice place to work, but we don't tend to say, I think you did a lousy job there. I think you're not good enough for the position you're in. We are way too nice. So we had this artificial harmony that was impeding us. It was a big roadblock for us. Again, we tested it out, we measured it, and this is what people would say, and then we call it out, that it's the ideas that you're pushing forward. They're not personal attacks on individuals, but to get comfortable with conflict. productive conflict, be more direct. That's something that we've been trying to work at. And you'll find as a team, as you form, you go through the forming, storming, norming phases of a team. It will help you if you look at some of these things and you say, okay, we're not comfortable with conflict, move on, cut through it, because it's very important to do these things. So one of the things that we've now moved on to is taking advantage of diversity. I have 40 people in Bangalore in my team, and we had looked at this quite plainly as a labour arbitrage. But really what we needed to do was celebrate our diversity, and this was one of the things where we got one of the guys in Bangalore. He created this video of himself as one of the most popular Bollywood movies. So sharing this with folks in Fort Lauderdale, the folks in Boston and the UK, we then appreciate the diversity that we've got, that it's more than just cheap labour, it's human capability, and how do we know that people are capable of this creativity? It's very powerful to enable people. So what I do is I mention, maybe I'll ask you to draw out examples where you've seen cultural aspects of companies that have been distinctive, that you think might be useful to apply to your group, to this task. Maybe if some people have some good examples to share. I've certainly shared some from Citrix, and you can take these organizations I'm mentioning here, but I think it's more useful if we take some of your war stories. Does anybody have some stories where they've had a cultural aspect that worked really good and might be worth sharing? Go for it. Okay. And they care. Yeah. You see how many organizations that you get on to customer service, this is a pet peeve of mine. I actually want someone to care. Yeah, I want someone to fix the problem quickly, but I do want them not just to read the script, I want them to actually care. Showing empathy can be a powerful weapon to convince people. Cool. Any other examples?
Yes, I work for a company called CHG. It's a healthcare recruiting firm, and they went from 27 down to number 3 on the company's most admired list, and a lot of that was based on the culture. And they would actually hire people only if they would fit in the culture. It was very relaxed. It could be very blunt. Curse. It wasn't as professional as I was used to.
Sure.
We would have skits like Saturday Night Live, had quarterly reviews. The CEO would wear jeans and dance, do hip hop. It was just, everyone loved to work there.
True.
And it was because of the culture.
Yeah. If you look at Zappos, that's what Zappos does. They hire people and then they find an opportunity to fit them into. They're not hiring you for a role, they're hiring you for cultural fit, and then they'll work it out afterwards. So what I'll finish off with is just to note that you look at this and you can have these labels and these expectations of a demographic of this type of person behaves this way. No, it's much more about the attitude. And as you learn about each other, to say, how do we take advantage of our diversity and what we believe in? How do we put that down and how do we amplify it? There's much that you can do with culture that's very important to take advantage of the strengths, to put some guardrails on disadvantages that you have. But it's really much more about the attitude of people, of how they'll go about it. And that's certainly what we saw at Citrix. You may think that people that are more senior in the organization would fight such a radical way of changing the environment. No, we've seen the opposite, that people embrace it if it makes sense and they believe in it. So it's much more powerful to leverage a belief system and a common interest than a business strategy. Okay, I think I'm at my time there, but do we have a couple of minutes for questions? Okay, sure. So maybe if I open it up and we'll see, do you think this is relevant to the task that you've got? Do you think culture is important? Or I'm happy to take any questions on Citrix and what we've done there with culture.
Would you establish the culture first, or would you have the business awareness, and then decide what the culture is.
Yeah, so let me talk about the Citrix situation, and then maybe it'll be different for the task that you have. If I look at the Citrix situation, when I joined Citrix 7 years ago, you then look at it and you say, what is the corporate culture? This is well defined. The company was about 18 years old at that time. I have to take those values and I can amplify some of them. I'm going to introduce things that are inconsistent with the corporate culture, but I'm not changing or setting it because I'm joining the organization. When you have a task like what you have ahead of you, you're going to do it iteratively. It's not a specific deliverable, but I think it would help you if you write down and codify what's the objective, what are we getting at? Is it to score well, or is it the journey, is it the learning from that? Then you've got a blank piece of paper almost in terms of what you can set with this task, but it's going to be iteratively. And you look at the Jerry Maguire example where he writes it down to start off with. He didn't update that manifesto as he went through his journey, but you do start from the base, and I think it's useful to sync with people to say, is this what we're about? Is this what's going to cause us to have a better outcome? Okay, any other questions?
Behind you.
Sure.
Office to see your redesign, and that was a great opportunity. I was wondering, because I saw that you have a spattering of stand-up desks. So how popular they are, since you get, as you said, the first come, first serve, they get to choose where they want to be. But it would also help in terms of the company, in terms of reducing healthcare costs long term.
Yeah, so stand-up desks is kind of interesting. There was an article in the Miami Herald about a year and a half ago where they wrote about that. In the most recent space we opened 6 months ago, there's one floor that has about 400 spaces on it, and we have 4 stand-up desks there. The utilization of those desks is fairly low in that we haven't specifically measured it. But they're not overutilized. So what we can do with this model, because it's so flexible, if you look at one of those desks, they cost $3,000. So it's okay for us to share one of those desks across 400 people, because we get about, on average, I think it's about 2 hours a day of usage from people walking up to them and taking them. The nice thing about this model is most people don't want to have a stand-up desk all day. They just want to go there for like 30 minutes, get the blood circulating, maybe an hour, and then go somewhere else. This is one of the wonderful things about the flexibility that we have with the pooling of assets that are shared amongst 400 people. You can have these 4 desks that then, if they get overutilized, we'll add one more. One of the things that we had, and I think you were on the tour, so you probably saw it, is a health room. Some of us call it a hangover room. But it's basically a room where you can lock the door and go quiet. So if you've got a migraine, if you want to have a nap, nursing moms, we use that for multiple things. We've had tons of unexpected delight from that. Of one of the most common usages is prayer or insulin shots. That people will use it for whatever makes sense to them. That we had people in the IT department going out to the car park to pray a couple of times a day that we were not even aware of. When we then trust people to say, you have that space, use it for whatever is important to you within the bounds of the law, they then go, oh my God, this company trusts me. They are way more productive because they get trusted. And the amount of free riding and abuse when we have self-regulation is minimal, and that makes it a different place to work. Cool. Do we have time for one more question?
I have a question, because I see that you mentioned about the vision, but you don't say anything about the mission statement of your organization. I would like to know if the culture is the mission.
No, so if we look at vision, and this is where these things get discombobulated, or people will flip through them as a fad, that we say the vision. If you were to say, the words of it, you can rephrase that and we will say, this is the way we want the world to be, where you can experience work and life in harmony. If you want to say there's a mission, live better, work better. That it doesn't really matter to us what label you put on it as a vision or a mission, the ultimate goal or the path there. People get head up on what the label is. So to us it's not that important. The one thing that we will articulate, and we'll call it a vision, we won't say that we have a mission, because it's not that important for us to have all of these interlinking categories the way a business strategy book has it. So it's the way we want to go and the work. And then we'll have a number of business objectives that will support that. So one of ours is a thing we call X5. That is to be $5 billion in revenue by 2016, 2017. So there are other things, but I wouldn't personally think it's that important to get too head up. Whether it's called a mission or a vision, different companies will use different definitions. Okay? Great, thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Very nice, thank you. Very good. So I must say, I also was there at the reception when Citrix opened, and it's a beautiful floor, beautiful building. And my favorite part was you can actually write on anything. They have their cafeteria is a whiteboard where you're sitting. Their office, their conference rooms, offices, there's whiteboards everywhere. It's very cool. You have to see that. It's wonderful. Thank you very much.